things over to our moderator, Kelly Clark, Director of Marketing at CoStar. Kelly.
Thank you. Well, hello and welcome to this special ICSC member presentation, Optimizing Retail Portfolios with CoStar's Market Analytics and Applications. Again, I'm Kelly Clark, and it's my pleasure to moderate today's discussion. And as they said, if you have any questions, use the chat feature to send in those questions, because we're planning to give you a lot of information today. It's going to highlight a lot of things that you may or may not be aware are available in the CoStar database, as well as using applications that will help you kind of optimize portfolios, find cost savings, and even comply with lease accounting standards that are out there that some of you may be aware of now. So let me introduce our presenters today. First is Ned Walter. Ned's been with CoStar for more than 15 years, and he's the Director of Real Estate Management and Lease Accounting Solutions here at Real Estate Manager. In his time, he's crafted a number of retail enterprise solutions to help align strategies to drive growth and profitability. He has extensive experience in helping retailers enhance their retail operations using our system. And he's going to highlight some of those things for you today. And also, Brandon Sivik is with us. He's our National Director of U.S. Retail Analytics. He's been with CoStar for 5 years, and he guides all the research and analysis on the U.S. real estate market. He has extensive prior experience as well in the commercial real estate space, having been a VP of research, development, and due diligence with the Inland Group of companies. So without any other ado, I want to turn it over to Ned, who's going to get us started today. Take it away, Ned.
Thanks, Kelly. I appreciate that. And, I wanted to just introduce at a high level the two concepts that we're going to be walking through today. A retailer or restaurant may look at this on the one hand, market information, in other words, access to and visibility into external factors. And on the other hand, management applications, access to internal factors, both of which will influence performance, decision-making, and execution. External market information can include things like center information, availability, lease comps, fair market value, co-tenant information, market fundamentals, demographics, all kinds of information about the real estate market out there. Internal management applications, on the other hand, may include things like lease administration, lease accounting and compliance, payments, percent rent calculations, sales reporting, store performance KPIs, documents and deal making approvals and SOX controls. In addition, things like store construction and budgets. In short, a retail tenant or a restaurateur must balance both internal and external factors in day-to-day operations and decision making in order to optimize the performance of their store portfolios. So with that, next slide, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Brandon Sivik, to take us through CoStar market information and how it can be used to access and understand external factors important to retailers.
Great. Thanks a lot, Ned. And great to be with everyone today. As Ned mentioned, my name is Brandon Sivik. I'm the National Director of U.S. Retail Analytics for CoStar Group. Great to be with everyone today. So today we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to talk about some data. We're going to talk about some interesting trends that we're seeing in the retail industry. And we're going to talk about how we can explore those trends further and actually get a chance to walk through some of the CoStar product and see how I use the tool really to bring out the best insights and to find new insights, which can, of course, help us optimize our retail portfolio. So before we jump into some of the trends and some of the analysis using the product, I just want to give everybody a very quick high-level understanding of who CoStar is. So for those of you who aren't familiar with CoStar, CoStar is big data. CoStar is the unofficial commercial real estate MLS, and CoStar is the primary source of data and information for the commercial real estate industry. So we think of ourselves as the most powerful commercial real estate platform and network across the not only US, but across the globe. We invest over $2.5 billion in our research and technology and have been doing this for 34 years. How does one track billions of data points over millions of properties across the US and now the globe? It takes an entire team. It takes a huge research apparatus, 4,500 employees worldwide, over 177,000 users utilizing CoStar data. CoStar is actually the second largest research organization in the entire United States, next to only the US Census Bureau, right? So it takes an army of individuals and an army of data feeds to help bring all of this data to the marketplace. So when we think about the CoStar apparatus and what we're bringing to the table, we're really molding both traditional research processes with new technology. And what I mean by that is we have over 1,400 client relationship consultants who are using that tried and true form of research methodology and collection by calling properties, by calling landlords and collecting that data on a ongoing basis. We're using new technologies such as drones, over 200 cars that are driving the markets, as well as over 20 real-time data feeds and third-party data resources that provide us everything, or that provide us data on everything from CMBS loans to public records, to taxes, to ownership. We have a team of over 100 analysts and economists, a team in which I'm proud to be a part of, who are sitting here all day long doing nothing but looking at these billions of data points coming in, making sense of them, and helping make tools that help make that data actionable for our clients. So we're currently tracking over 6 million properties in the US alone, over 129 billion square feet of commercial real estate space, over a million active listings for both sales and leases on market, but whether that through CoStar directly or through one of our companies and our subsidiaries, LoopNet. Over 8.3 million past comparables and over 7.8 million tenants profiles, so you can understand who's where and how they're expanding and what that footprint looks like. So I mentioned we bring in third-party data feeds, right? These are everything from demographics, which we rely on Neustar for, as well as Experian, traffic counts, parcel counts, assessment data, Energy Star data, economic data provided to us from Expert Economics, as well as a host of other information that helps supplement over 12,500 market and submarket reports across property types that also include over 63,000 different forecast scenarios, including vacancies, rents, demand, all powered and supported by the world's biggest, deepest, most up-to-date database of commercial real estate information known to man. So with direct, unlimited, and on-demand access to current market data and analytics, we really empower our clients and real estate teams to perform better comprehensive coverage, to discover more opportunities for cost savings or new spaces within markets that they want to expand in, to make more confident and informed decisions and recommendations, to help secure stronger negotiating positions, right? Knowledge is power, right? And certainly the knowledge that comes to you with the CoStar platform helps empower you to have stronger negotiating positions when the time comes. Direct your brokers more effectively, and at the end of the day, do what we're all trying to do, right? Deliver more value to the business. So we benefit a lot of different teams across the ecosystem, whether that be real estate teams directly, portfolio administration, accounting, and finance. We find that our clients really benefit from empowering their people with this CoStar data and allowing their people to maximize this data across their respective companies. So how else does this help, right? It helps maintain confidentiality for strategic planning, achieve faster collaboration with your brokers. And we've seen a ton of tenants and retailers and brands who have found a lot of value in CoStar and continue coming back as clients. So these are just some of the tenants and retailers and brands that we proudly call our clients and our partners. And we continue to work with a who's list of not just owners, not just brokers, not just developers, but also tenants and users of space as well. So with that background out of the way, now let's have some fun. All right, let's jump into the data, let's jump into the analytics and actually take a test drive of the platform itself. So we're going to start very quickly with some high-level trends on what we're seeing across the marketplace. CoStar serving as that unofficial MLS for the commercial real estate industry, serving as that primary marketing platform for space across the United States via CoStar and LoopNet, provides us with really an unprecedented view into what's happening in the marketplace. So we're going to start first and foremost at the very top, right? Total retail leasing across the entire United States, which we know obviously dipped in the wake of the pandemic. Certainly, being forced to stay at home, having lockdowns, having our operations around the US really curtailed, we'll do that, right? But I'm happy to report that as the consumer has come back, right, armed with trillions of dollars, thanks to the federal government, the retailers have come back as well. And we're starting to see more and more go into expansion mode. We're not quite back to where we were at in pre-pandemic levels of total leasing activity. So to give a little perspective, in 2019, the last year, not impacted by the pandemic, we saw about 22.5 million square feet of average leasing volume recorded in CoStar on a monthly basis. I'm going to take a step back and just let that number sit for a second. 22.5 million square feet per month. Right? We're talking about close to 250 million square feet of leasing activity recorded by CoStar during the entire year of 2019. Now, we're not quite back yet to those levels. We hit nearly 21 million square feet of average monthly leasing activity in the first quarter of 2022. But some of the leases do come into the system after the fact, right? So naturally, a lot of times, a lot of leases get signed at the end of the month, and our researchers may find out about them, T+3, 4, 5 days at the end of the month. And so we record that leasing activity as after month end. You'll notice that my March does not have an after month end, right? We haven't yet calculated that amount that's come into the system after the end of March 31st. The only reason I say that is because it is looking very possible that when we do include that additional leasing data, we will be looking at a March that was the strongest month of any month going back to 2018. And for the very first time since 2018, was a month in which we eclipsed 25 million square feet of leasing activity. So too soon to say, but we're getting certainly some positive wins and some positive directions to say that, in fact, March could have been the strongest leasing month that we've seen in over 3 years. Now, the retail world remains highly bifurcated. Right, as we all know, whether that be from a space use perspective, from a center type perspective, and certainly from a geographic perspective, right? We still live in an age where retail follows rooftops. And as such, when we look into that data and say, okay, well, where is that demand flowing across the US? We see a really strong correlation with those same markets that are attracting and capturing an outsized share of population and job growth within the US border. So markets in the Southeast, markets in the Southwest, right? Sometimes people like to refer to them as the smile markets, right? If I drew a smile across the US, right, these would be the markets that would be encapsulated within that area. Austin, Dallas, San Antonio, Houston, Inland Empire, Las Vegas, all markets in the South, all markets experience explosive population growth, really since before the pandemic, but certainly that's accelerated since the start of the pandemic. So conversely, right, if a lot of my high growth markets and a lot of my expansionary markets are in the Southeast and Southwest, unfortunately, the flip side of that is true for a lot of my Midwestern and my Northeastern markets, right? Markets that are losing population and sometimes to those Southeastern and Southwestern markets, or at the very best, are stagnating from a population perspective. And as such, whereas we don't see necessarily broad-based growth, we see more pruning of locations, pruning of areas, certainly a lot of turnover underneath the surface, but not a ton of net absolute growth, right? And those are going to be my markets like Minneapolis, like Cincinnati, like St. Louis, like Chicago, right? My lower growth to no growth demographic markets really aren't capturing that same level of demand growth from retailers, which makes sense. Again, as we find most of the US has an adequate current supply of retail stock, but in certain areas where we're seeing 1.5, nearly 2% population growth per year, those are the areas where we are seeing that expansion. Now, CoStar does give you the ability to drill both from a top down as well as from a bottom up perspective into trends happening within markets across the US. And I look forward to walking through kind of how we can allow you to do both. We're going to start with the top down, and you'll notice I had Phoenix highlighted in my prior slide in green. The only reason is because we're going to use Phoenix today as an example. We're going to use the Phoenix market as an example as how we can take that top-down approach and start with the US, work down to a market, work down to a submarket, work down to a corridor, work down to an opportunity. Okay, so we're going to start at the top, and here's what the CoStar portal looks like at the very front end of our what's called our markets tab. So the CoStar system is broken into multiple different portals. Our markets portal is really where we take all of those data points that we're collecting at the property level on a daily basis, and we aggregate them up into market and submarket performance. Nice thing is it's a very dynamic and easy to use portal, and that makes it fun. So we're going to start right off the bat with making sure we're clicked on retail, because CoStar is covering multiple property types across the commercial real estate landscape. And you can see here that currently I have 451 markets. You can see in the top right corner here that CoStar is tracking that is within my window. Now, I mentioned I want to narrow in on Phoenix for this example so that we have a real example to walk through. So as I zoom my map into the southeast or southwestern portion of the United States, you notice that the markets dropped from over 450 now to 74 markets. I'm now looking at the 74 markets that are within my map frame here within this southwestern region of the United States. Now, if I click on list here, you'll notice I have map, I have list, I have compare. Compare is where I can actually compare some of this criteria on a market by market basis. But even cooler than that is our list function, because if I click on list, what I'm going to get is a table form of all of the high level operating characteristics of these 74 markets that were within my frame here. Right, so you can see Los Angeles, Dallas, Houston, all of our markets here, Phoenix, which I mentioned we're going to use as the example today. Now, a couple things about this table. First and foremost, it's dynamic. Just like Excel, if I want to sort any of these columns, all I have to do is click on them. And for example, I can see which of these markets is reporting the highest rent growth. It's Las Vegas, just to give that away, 10.8%. And these are actual figures pulled directly from CoStar as of last week. So these are the actual characteristics, of these various markets, and I can click on any one of these and sort them. Now, you can see we have both space level characteristics, right? What is vacancy doing? What are rents doing? What are availabilities doing? But then we also have demographic and economic drivers as well. Right? What is income growth doing? What is population growth doing? Right? How is the actual local market economy looking? Now, as I click here to the right and click on filters, I'm not beholden just to the columns that you see here, but rather I can add over 70 additional filters that I can use to select my market. So say, for example, I only want to target markets that have a certain population growth or certain buying power growth. I can do that by clicking on these filters and then clicking into any one of these additional filters that I can add. Now, I can compare these filters both on a mid-max basis, right? So put in a minimum, put in a maximum. I can also put in looking at these filters from a historical or a forecasted basis as well. So utilizing the power of Oxford Economics, our forecasting partners, we do provide to you population, economic, buying power, growth forecasts as well. So it's not just information from a historical perspective, but you can look at this information from a forecasted perspective as well. So now that we understand the filters, let's dig into Phoenix a little bit closer, should we? So as I click on Phoenix, what you'll notice is I bring out Phoenix's own platform. So each market within CoStar has its own market platform, which helps describe what's going on in the market. I mentioned our team of 100 analysts and economists, and that's who's in charge with populating this information. We have an analyst or an economist in most major markets across the US, and they're really an on-the-ground resource for you and what's happening in that market. So you'll notice we break out each one of these across various tabs, across the main criteria or operating criteria within commercial real estate. How is leasing, how's rent doing, what's happening in construction and sales and the overall economy. Our CMBS tab, where we highlight any properties that are subject to securitized financing and what the performance of those properties are. And then also the submarkets and data tab. Now, within each one of these markets, you'll find KPIs, which will provide you a nice historical understanding of where we are today as far as relative to where we've been and where we're forecasted to be across, again, those same commercial real estate, operating performance factors. We also provide a very dynamic charting tool where you can pull up and analyze the charts within any one of these markets. So for example, I picked the availability rate. So right now what we're looking at is the availability rate of various center types within the Phoenix market. Now you'll notice here we have a plethora of available charts that you can very quickly, easily pull. And I can also, if I want to adjust my history, turn on a forecast, create the charts that I need in a very dynamic and quick way. Now, going back to our main page for Phoenix, I did want to highlight that within the Phoenix market, as I mentioned, top-down approach, right? We have the ability to get more granular with our geographic description. So every market within CoStar has submarkets, right? Where we go and we define in a more granular fashion, oftentimes based upon trade areas, neighborhood boundaries, oftentimes with the help and input of the local brokerage community. We dissect our markets into these submarkets such that we can really understand the various drivers and the various performance differences across a market, right? We know the Phoenix market, well, pretty much hot all the way around, is not a homogeneous blob, right? There is a lot of bifurcation occurring under the surface in performance, and we want to make sure that we put ourselves in the best position to capture that. So we do provide these submarkets, all of the same criteria, all of the same information that you saw pushed through to the markets tab is going to be available in the submarkets tab as well. So as, for example, I click on downtown Phoenix, it'll highlight the submarket in my map here. And it'll give me all of those same factors that I was provided for when I was looking at just the wider Phoenix market, with the addition of properties, because CoStar always wants to make sure you understand what properties and what data are actually aggregating up into this information that you're seeing. Downtown Phoenix retail, we're checking 8.5 million square feet of retail space. 8.5 million square feet of retail space in just little downtown Phoenix, right? Not little, but on a comparative basis to the entire US, a very small geographical area, 8.5 million square feet of retail space. But we don't want you to ever be in the dark as to what's driving these aggregations. And as such, you can click on any one of these properties that are actually underneath the surface and helping to aggregate up into that section. The other thing that we can do is we can look at these properties across on a map-based function, right? So show me the retail properties in CoStar, but not just, based upon those that are in the downtown submarket or just the aggregations of the submarket and markets themselves, but show me the individual properties themselves. And actually, please, while you're at it, show me properties that have current space availabilities. Well, given our place as the primary listing and marketing platform for the commercial real estate industry, that's very easy for us to do. So by clicking on map here, notice I'm now still in my Phoenix, Arizona area. And by dragging down my bar to for lease and for retail, I can now look at all space availabilities within the Phoenix MSA. And you'll see here that there's actually 3,674 retail spaces currently on market in Phoenix, right, across 1,992 properties. So by clicking on list away from map, I can actually see each one of these properties, get all of the property level information at a very high level, including building square footage, what the average rents per square foot are, what the asking rents per square foot are currently, what submarket location, who the landlord representative. As we drag right here, we have significantly more information available to you on the individual property level. We also provide, similar to what we provide at the market and submarket level with those filters, we provide a ton of filters, actually over 200 different criteria that you can filter by within CoStar to help narrow that search, right? Narrow in those available spaces from the 1,900 potential properties, right? And let's bring that into something closer to what I as a retailer am actually looking for. Right, so let's walk through a very, very quick example of just saying, well, what if I only wanted to see the spaces between 9,500 and 10,000 square feet? I know that's my desired footprint. Show me CoStar those available spaces. Well, easily done by just a few clicks of the mouse. Now all of a sudden I'm looking at the 120 spaces and 86 properties that have an availability of your desired size. Now let's take a look at some of those further, shall we? So if I click on one of those properties, and then immediately once I click on a tab, it will bring that property up to the top placard here on the right. So this property right here is 6020 6052 North 59th Street or North 59th Avenue. So what we're going to use it as an example here. So you'll notice popped up to the right. And when I click on that placard, I'm going to come into the property level page. All 6 million properties that CoStar is tracking has a property level page. This is where you're going to get those additional details that you need to really understand. Okay, great. Phoenix is hot. Maybe I want to be in the downtown submarket. Fantastic. Now, what availabilities are there and what do these properties actually look like? Right. So this is where you're going to be able to dig into the individual properties themselves and get more information. So using this Family Dollar anchored center here, Glen Fair Plaza, you can see, for example, here's our space availability. I have 10,000 square feet available at $8 a square foot on a triple net basis. Now, I, as a retailer, have the ability to dig into this property further, now understanding that A, an availability exists, B, what the cost of that availability is, and now C, armed with all of the other information that I want to look at to determine whether this is a potential site for me. So with that, we're going to shift to understanding now the site. Okay, so we took a top-down approach. We understood, okay, we can dissect markets. We can analyze every market in the entire US on really any way that you would want to from a real estate performance or economic performance perspective, right? We can identify those markets we want to be in and we can identify those opportunities. So now let's look at how we can identify those opportunities and really understand them further. And to do that, first and foremost, we're going to look at some of the lease structure and some of the tenant tools and that CoStar provides. So first and foremost, we are tracking every lease that is signed, right? I mentioned all of the leasing activity, right? The nearly 22 million square feet of leasing activity in the first quarter of 2022. Well, every lease signed, we're tracking those tenants, right? Where are those tenants at? Who's signing for what space? Where are they signing for space? And when we look at that data and we aggregate it up, we see that Dollar Tree is in fact signed the most space thus far through the first quarter of the year. So 251,000 square feet overall Dollar Tree signed for. You can see the rest of the list here as far as a who's who of really expanding retailers, right? A lot of discount, some at home or and also nicely some experiential as well, right? As both Planet Fitness and Urban Air both make this list of top 8 lessors of new space across the country in the first quarter. Now, more interesting than that oftentimes is really what rates are we seeing signed for and at what maturities are we seeing leases come through. So based upon the 19,500 retail leases CoStar recorded in the first quarter, I'm going to say that one more time because that's a big number, right? 19,500 retail leases recorded in just the first quarter. We can actually dissect where are we seeing these deals come in on an average asking rent basis. So for example, right, over 3/4 of those 19,570 leases were signed for a triple net rent somewhere between $10 to $30 a square foot. Now we could get much more granular, but I wanted to keep it rather high level for this analysis, but we could see those figures in a much more granular way should we choose to. On the other chart that we're looking at here, we can also see that 2/3 of space signed for, or 2/3 of those 19,570 leases had a maturity somewhere between 1 to 5 years. We know lease maturities have been coming in, no doubt in response to the pandemic. And quite frankly, we haven't yet seen it in our data where they're starting to expand back out. So we would expect to see it eventually, but we're not quite there yet. And as of right now, certainly the preference has still been for those shorter lease maturities. So I'm going to go back to my example really quickly here in Phoenix, and I'm going to show how we can actually use the CoStar tool to understand not just the properties, right? Not just the rents, not just the market factors and what's driving the market and where availabilities are at, but who's where. right? If I go into this property, who am I going to be sharing this property with? Who's going to be around me? Who's potentially complementary to me? Who's potentially competing with me? CoStar has built in an incredibly powerful tenant database that allows you to analyze all of those things. So by clicking on tenants here, remember our filters, right? I said we had over 200 different filters that you could select by. By some of those filters are pertain simply to the tenants, right? So I can, for example, say, find me retail properties containing a certain tenant or not containing a certain tenant, right? I can also say, find properties within a certain radius of a tenant. Now, this is actually can be really, really useful in certain instances. Say, for example, when we find out that JCPenney's is potentially looking to acquire Kohl's. Well, it took me about 1 minute to realize that, okay, what is the overlap and potential cannibalization of a JCPenney potentially acquiring Kohl's, which we just found out about, right? Well, with about 14 clicks of the mouse and about 2 minutes later, I was able to figure out that over 60% of JCPenney stores are currently within 3 miles of a Kohl's, right? And over a third of their stores are currently within 1 mile of a store, right? So certainly some cannibalization risk as we think about that. So let's walk through this example very, very quickly. So I can click on find me tenants, both based upon tenants themselves, like a JCPenney or Kohl's, or by the store type, right? Say I know I want to be by a particular store type, right? Whether whatever that may be, I can click on, for example, show me all Starbucks, right? So show me properties where there's a Starbucks, and what I'm looking at here is a map in Glendale and in the Phoenix market of all the Starbucks in the area, just by searching Starbucks there. Now, what I can also do is come over to store types and say, well, don't just show me Starbucks. I actually want to see all coffee shops, right? So now I brought in not just the Starbucks, right? But I also brought in my Dutch Brothers here and my Caribou here, right? So now I'm looking at all potential coffee shops. If for some reason being near or far away from a coffee shop is relevant to your business, you now have the powers and the tools at your hands to make those decisions and really quickly understand who's where, right? Because not only are we just rolling out the tenants or the store types, but we also provide maps where you can look at where every national retailer is at on a particular corridor or within a particular area. So here's that same area of Glendale, right? And now I'm looking at all of my national retailers, and I can really get an understanding for not only the corridor density and depth, but who's where. It is through this same map that we also do provide other types of data that I think would be really relevant to you, including traffic count data, right? So as I try and understand what my traffic counts look like, what my traffic patterns look like, we provide all of that data as well in this same map-based function. So we've talked about how CoStar can help you analyze markets, filter markets, understand what's happening in markets, in submarkets, understand availabilities, find those availabilities, find out who's by you, who's going to compete with me, who's going to complement me. Of course, we couldn't really analyze retail, though, if we didn't have the power to analyze demographics as well. Right? At the end of the day, in retail, demographics are destiny. So CoStar understands that, and we've rolled out a ton of tools for our clients to be able to analyze the demographics in their respective areas. These include tools that allow you to analyze the performance of property by demographics. So for example, this is a study that we did, was looking at based upon 3-mile radiuses in shopping centers of 10,000 square feet or more, what were current and what were the vacancy rates pre-pandemic based upon density and income, right? So based upon income brackets of 100,000 or more, or 50 to 100 or under 50,000, same with density. How is vacancy differing across the US landscape? And obviously we know that it does differ significantly depending upon the demographics in the backyard of the area. So because of that, within every single property page, as I mentioned, every property in CoStar has a page. Within that property page in demographics, we provide a lot of different charts, information, and tables that help you really understand the demographics within that area. We currently are showing a 135 mile here. Now this is dynamic. I can change my radiuses should I have a different trade area for my respective, from my company or as a retailer. We provide this data not just on a historical perspective, not just on a current perspective, but also on a forward-looking perspective. Right. So by working with CoStar, by analyzing properties with CoStar, you're getting the power of Oxford economics data and forecasts pushed into the product, which help drive these forecasts. So for example, I can see that here in my property, in my Family Dollar anchored property I used as an example earlier. My current 1 mile population is 28,000. It's projected to be nearly 31,000, or about a 1.5% annual growth rate between now and 2026, right? So this helps you understand not just where the demographics are today, where they've come from, and where they're going. Now, we also provide a lot of charts and easy ways to take in this information. Because we are visual creatures, I know I myself am, I oftentimes find myself working with the charts a lot more than the tables, just because this really, quite frankly, I think tells the story in the demographic picture. So things such as household income, population, housing type, housing occupancies, home values, and total employment figures, occupational figures, and then per capita household spending and consumer spending figures, right? So we take all of the consumer spending information as well, roll that in at the actual property level, and then we actually provide a dynamic way that you can search for it. So the other way that you can look at demographics in CoStar isn't just by radius, but it's also by utilizing our layers. So within our layers function, we do have heat maps available, such that I can look at the demographics of an area in a heat map like function. 1, 3, 5 mile radiuses are fantastic, and they're what we've always all been beholden to. But everyone on this call knows there are invisible lines in real estate, right? I want to be south of 75th Street. I want to be east of the tracks. Radiuses don't do a great job of capturing real estate's invisible lines, right? Demographic heat maps do. And because of that, we've pushed through demographic heat maps on 7 different factors for you. We're actually in the process of expanding these factors, but currently you can get things such as density, age, percentage of college graduates, buying power potential, obviously a measure of both density and income, to really help you understand where do the demographics align with my preferred customer. As I mentioned, we offer the opportunity not just to understand the demographics at the center level, but to actually find the center by the demographics, right? So we do have within our filters here, I mentioned over 200 filters that you can find availabilities by. In the more section here, there actually is an entire section devoted solely to demographics. Now we can change our mile radius here. You see 3 of the potential options right here in front of you, but there's actually significantly more options available to you. So we can find properties or centers where the average income between certain age buckets meets a desired criteria. We can even use our consumer spending data, right? That crucial consumer spending data I just showed you that's within the demographic platform. We can use that data to help us find opportunities, right? So if our, business is relevant to boats and outdoor motorsports, right? We can look even as granular as what boat and outdoor motorsport consumer spending in 2026 is expected to be. And we can find those opportunities accordingly. So you can see really how CoStar, I think, has done a wonderful job to blend the drivers, right? The demographics, the economics behind what's driving space uses, and then the actual space availabilities in property database itself. So right now, for example, I'm looking at all properties where the population growth over the next 5 years is expected to be greater than 10%. Just showing it as an example of really how dynamic you can get and how CoStar can help you find your tenants. The other thing are your desired properties. The other thing I can do as well is once I find a particular data set, if I wanted to test my hypothesis as to how and where we should be, I can always roll up the performance of any property data set within CoStar that I pick. so that I can really understand how is this data set performing together. So for example, the 23 properties that met that demographic criteria in total are an aggregate of 741,000 square feet. And I can see all of the performance characteristics of how those properties are performing. And similar to what I showed you in the markets and submarkets, how we have all of those wonderful charts, I have all of those same charting opportunities available to me, even on just this custom set of 23 properties. So as I mentioned, CoStar, we take it from a top down as well as a bottom up approach. The top down is certainly being able to find opportunities as you squeeze through markets and submarkets and properties. The bottom up approach is then being able to take any subset of properties that you choose and aggregate that performance and roll it back up together. I'm going to pause for a quick drink here. And then we're going to analyze some retail rents. So we're going to start first and foremost with just what the data is telling us, right? So CoStar, as I mentioned, the primary marketing space for real estate opportunities across the US. And as such, we get an incredible view into what's happening with rents that are signed, as well as what's happening with spaces that are currently on market and are changing their rents, right? So CoStar has created a same store rent approach to where we are providing a same store rent series across all retail properties and all retail spaces in the US. And when we look at that series, we see that rents have actually accelerated at their greatest clip in over a decade here, just as of the first quarter of 2022, up by 3.8% across the entire country. Now, obviously, if we look at this from a real perspective, right, rent growth would still be negative given the significant hot inflation that we're seeing. But nonetheless, still the strongest nominal rent growth that we've seen across the retail space, right? That tells me that certainly we're seeing some fundamental improvement and some rebalancing at the market level, which is definitely occurring. We're seeing certain corridors and markets really heat up and be very, very competitive, providing landlords with renewed pricing power, which is certainly happening. And we're certainly seeing inflation play a role in rents as it always has. So when we look at those markets, because similar to demand, similar to leasing, similar to new supply, we can break out all of these figures at a very granular geographic level. So if we just take this rent performance and we look at it from a market by market perspective, you're going to see that it pretty much dovetails with how you would expect it to, given the demand chart I showed you earlier. Right, those same markets that are attracting the lion's share of growth, those same markets that are attracting the lion's share of retailer expansion, net new expansion, are also the same markets that are seeing the fastest rent growth, right? Markets in the Southeast, markets in the Southwest, Las Vegas, #1 overall, 11.3%. But interesting to note that based upon all of these markets and based upon the hot inflation rates we've seen, only 3 markets have actually seen positive real rent growth over the last year relative to nominal rent growth, which is shown here. Now, conversely, same story is true with my slow growth markets, right? Markets where I'm not seeing demand grow, where I'm not seeing population grow, where maybe there's pruning, but not net new growth. I'm seeing a very, very stagnant rent market. And frankly, relative to inflation and relative to what a lot of retailer sales are doing today, occupancy costs on a real basis are actually going down. So it's very similar to what we did with the spaces. We can analyze retail rents within CoStar as well. So I went back to my example here of my 23 properties we were looking at earlier, clicked on my first one that looks like we have a couple space availabilities, anywhere from 1,000 to 15,000 square feet at $25 a foot on a triple net basis, right? So this is, again, this rent performance data is being driven by the actual properties themselves. And we're recording this data at the space level to give you the ability to now say, what markets do I want to be in? What factors, what demographic factors, what size and location and traffic count factors are important to me, right? Let me put that into this dynamic portal, come up with my 26 potential opportunities, and now I can actually look at these and see the actual economic occupancy costs listed on the website here. So $25 a foot, triple net basis. Now I can actually wrap up again, the analytics to say, okay, well, looking at these properties, let's just say, and I know looking at this map that wouldn't truly be the case, but pretend with me for a second that each one of these properties are interchangeable as a location and as a potential desired spot. I now can understand by rolling up the analytics how rents are performing within each one or within the aggregate of these properties on a per square foot basis, both as a market rent, which is CoStar's same store series rent, as well as an asking rent, which is really just a space weighted average of what's currently on market. So again, we provide a couple different ways for you to understand in this instance, what's happening in for lease retail spaces between 9,500 and 10,000 square feet in Phoenix, where the 1 mile radius is expected to see a 10% population growth rate over the next 5 years. It's a mouthful, right? But it's a mouthful because it speaks to how dynamic and how friendly, user-friendly the platform really is, and how nuanced it allows you to become in understanding what opportunities exist out in the marketplace. So thank you. I appreciate you bearing with me for all of that, and I'm going to pass it back over to Ned.
Great, thanks, Brandon. I'll if we could, we'll circle back for questions at the end. And I think just to set a little bit of context again, Brandon just walked us through exactly how we can look at external factors in the market in order to influence and make better decisions related to our retail and real estate store opening plans. Next slide. So now I think what we'll shift to is looking at some of the internal management applications that again can include things like lease administration, lease accounting, and so on and so forth. So I mean, while we scratch the surface really on the market information, I'm going to try and in a hurry go through some of the internal factors related to retailer and restaurant decision making and operations. So these include things like payments, keeping the lights on, but also include things like deal making and capital approvals. And really, what a retailer and restaurant real estate department needs to do is a couple of things. You got to open new locations, manage your real estate and occupancy costs, optimize your real estate portfolio, and then ultimately now, more important than ever, is complying with FAS 842 and IFRS 16. So when we talk about, next slide, opening new locations, really it's about managing your deal pipeline, ranking sites, capturing site approvals, but also about setting realistic, reliable timelines for opening a store. Anyone in retail and in a restaurant would know that it takes a village to get a store open. You have to work across not just real estate, but also HR, marketing, inventory, and purchasing. So setting a store open date and then hitting those dates is crucial. And it's important to focus on sort of a standard playbook of opening a store and a new location versus one-offs as much as possible. And then in terms of next slide, the KPIs that would be managed here, really it's kind of a variety of factors, but in terms of scoring a site, you'll be looking at things like IRR, ROIC, and other things. A lot of these things may be leading indicators that are driven by customer data, demographics, psychographics, and things like that. But some of these will also be based on your experience in similar types of real estate. As you're looking at and scoring these stores as well, certain retailers are looking at how they can, and omnichannel retailers in particular, are also allocating a portion of these business cases, if you will, to some of the impacts that it can have to online sales related to these local markets. So then once a site is approved and identified, it's really about, executing against that and getting leases signed and negotiated, earning and winning favorable lease terms and flexibility, and managing and capturing the outcomes so that those can be reported upon, learned from, and ultimately refined in the playbook is key to longer term success. Next slide. Oh, sorry. This is just an example of a deal form that will help you to compare different sites and capture your business case again for posterity's sake, as well as for approvals through financing of the operations chain within your real estate organization. Next slide. And then this is just an example of some of those milestones or playbooks that can be managed. as well as online approval forms to expedite and again, instead of waiting on somebody to approve something, ensure that approvals are gained in a timely fashion and that open dates are hit. Next slide, Brandon. Next thing is around real estate operations. So this is really about like keeping the lights on, ensuring rent's paid on time, ensuring that the customer experience is consistent and predictable for your brand. But really, there's a lot more to it. There's critical date risk. Anybody on this call that's missed a critical date as a tenant and lost a profitable store knows the pain that can cause a company. Retail leases are also very, very complex, related to things like percentage rent, co-tenancy, CAM, tax, insurance, utilities, and trash, etc. Systems are key to doing this efficiently and accurately. So, ensuring that you've got accurate data and can take action in a timely manner on upcoming renewals and opportunities as they present themselves is key to success. And next slide, Brandon. Some of the KPIs that would be associated with that are listed here. Some are pretty simple, just month-over-month variance reporting. But then also, I think you may be interested in looking at things like sales as a percentage of occupancy costs, and even looking at that by landlord if you're dealing with some of the major landlords in this country. Next slide. This is just a simple screenshot of a dashboard within CoStar Real Estate Manager that someone that's managing your real estate operations might see. Quick access to managing occupancy costs, paying rent, and certainly the key metrics related to rent per square foot, active leases, upcoming expirations, and so on and so forth. So next slide. The next thing customers are retailers and restaurateurs, ultimately the ones that are successful over the long term do, is they're looking to optimize their portfolio. So, it's an old adage and maybe a little crude, but it's, you feed the horses, you milk the cows, and you deal with the dogs. You categorize all of your stores and locations based on how profitable they are. You invest in the best and milk the middle part of it and then divest the rest. So identifying where to deploy capital for new stores, remodels, and locations is critical. And really those decisions are also come at the intersection of external and internal factors. So, here's this slide just displays some of the KPIs our customers are looking at. If you hit the next slide there, Brandon. Really, you want to make sure that you're, getting to your renewals on time, that there's sufficient lead time in order to, maximize your outcomes there, and also looking at, four-wall contribution margins so that you can determine whether you're going to invest or divest or renew as is. Some of those key operating metrics like sales over occupancy costs or four-wall contribution. But you can also look at, hey, if you've been in a space for a while, the market has maybe changed. So you can look at, hey, what am I paying per square foot versus the market? And then take that information with you into any discussions you have with the landlord. Next slide. And this is just an example of our dashboard that we have where, if you're in a real estate department at an organization that's a national retailer, you're having to deal with renewals, new locations, closures, divestitures, and keeping track of all that is hard. Executing on that to plan and carrying out the playbook so that the rest of the team knows when things are happening. It's important to have a system in place that can keep you organized and ensure that your actions are predictable. Next slide. Last and maybe least for some of the groups on this call related to lease accounting, but super important. The new lease accounting standard has placed every lease that we sign on a company's balance sheet, and so the impacts of that on a company's key performance indicators are huge. Next slide, Brandon. ROA and ROE are some of the most common company-wide performance indicators. And leases definitely impact that. But as you're thinking about lease accounting, it's really about timely close and ensuring that you can pass audit and do it very efficiently. What we're seeing is that this is this development of lease accounting, while it hasn't necessarily changed deal making and decisions around lease terms as much as people thought, some of that may be obfuscated because of the fact of COVID over the last few years. It still is causing a lot of work internally and building a lot of inefficiencies and things that have to go into spreadsheets if you don't have a good system to do this and a good system to manage your renewals, your remeasurements, and all of your journal entries. So this is also a key aspect of a retail and restaurant real estate department, and being able to optimize your performance in this day and age related to growing your brand. So with that, and this is just another screenshot of our system. You want to be able to remeasure in a way that is touchless, and book journal entries in a way that's auditable and controlled, and then take a little bit more time on the exceptions and not have to have a lot of spreadsheets, because those spreadsheets will ultimately lead to mistakes, audit exceptions, and potentially restatements, which is the worst case scenario. So with that, we'll see if there's any questions, and I'll turn it back over to Kelly to take us out.
Thank you guys so much. One of our goals today was to highlight all the things that CoStar can do to help you. And it turns out it's a lot of information. So we went through it fast. We know that it's a lot of information to cover in just an hour's time, but we hope you'll find something in there was interesting, something you might want to follow up with us and get more detail on. I'll throw a couple of questions your way that we get asked all the time. So first of all, for Brandon, how often is all this data updated? When you look at, space availability and things like that changing, how often is that being changed in the system and updated?
Yeah, absolutely. So CoStar runs a live platform database. That means as changes are made by one of our 2,000 researchers, or oftentimes by individuals who are listing space directly with us, those changes will flow into the platform and you will see them almost instantaneously. So every property in CoStar is on a 30-day cycle where it's at least being called and updated and verified every 30 days. But many properties, and most of the time, the more dynamic properties, are updating on a more frequent basis.
Okay. And let's say I'm a real estate manager and I'm looking to go into the Phoenix market from your example today. I've looked at an area, I'm interested in this certain, like you said, maybe not just a radius, but a certain area of properties. Is there a way for me to track that area? So like if there's not a store or a space availability right now, but I want to kind of keep it on my radar because I'm a regional manager for that area, and something may change. How do I keep up to date with the changes that are going on in that certain area?
Yeah, absolutely. And so CoStar we understand that there's a lot we're throwing at you, right? And what we try and do is make it as easy as possible. So we do have a system by which once you run a search for a criteria of property within an area, you can save that search and let us do the hard work for you. So we'll do that by emailing you every day, or as frequent as you'd like, when there are changes in properties within your search. So say, for example, you didn't find a space at 12,000 square feet that was currently available, but you saved that search. There's nothing there today. You save it, you put out your checkbox. That's that easy to receive email updates. And then CoStar will track the market for you. And as soon as that 12,000 square foot availability hits our system, you're going to be getting pinged with an email the next morning letting you know that there is now this new availability.
Yeah, so that's really a great way to stay ahead of the competition if you're trying to secure a certain spot. If it's a particularly hot area that you're trying to get into, if you get notified right away, that would be an opportunity for you to take action and maybe try to get a deal going there, right?
Absolutely.
And then you can find broker information in CoStar too, so you know who to reach out to and say, hey, I want to take action on that space. Is that right?
That's correct. So CoStar does have a list of contacts. Pretty much everyone in the industry who's either leasing or selling property, whether that be from the brokerage perspective as well as from the landlord perspective. So we do provide that ownership information as well as the leasing contact information for every property in CoStar. And
Right.
Most of the time we're able to actually pierce the ownership LLC such that we're able to wrap all of that ownership together, and you can actually look at an entire portfolio, not just them on a single purpose LLC basis.
Right. Can we show on that last slide real quick? I know we're about out of time. Hopefully we've provided you some information today that you found interesting. If we did and you'd like to know more, if you get your phone out, you can actually scan that QR code. Just switch to the photo function and click that, and it'll take you to a website. We're actually going to be at the ICSC meeting coming up in Vegas in next month. If you'd like to schedule a demonstration with us, we'd like to, give you a personalized tour of all this data, all the applications. Oh, and if you're interested, we could, put you in the drawing for a Tesla and $25,000 cash. So not a bad opportunity to do that as well. Even if you're not going to the show and you want a demonstration, just use that link and just give us your name and your email, and we'd be glad to reach out to you and answer questions and perhaps set up a time to give you a more customized demonstration of what we can do for you, okay? Thank you all so much for your time. I will turn it back over to the ICSC team, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much to everyone who joined, along with our speakers for today's great discussion. As mentioned at the start, we will share the recording with registered members. And as always, all past recordings are available on the website. Again, thanks to Brandon, Ned, and Kelly for today's discussion. We hope to see you all again. Have a great day.